Liberals. Great to see you in my home province, Nova Scotia. They say in Cape Breton, get her done and have some fun. And you guys are definitely getting it done. Your sleeves rolled up the last few days. And you're going to have a lot of fun tonight. You see out there in Argyle Street, the stage is set up. Yeah, the beer trucks are all emptied out, and the fiddle's in the case. It's going to be coming out later on. So you deserved it for all the work you're doing coming here, and we're looking forward to seeing you this evening. When you think about getting a job done, and you heard about the last hour or so the Prime Minister and what we're doing, and you see what he's doing from coast to coast to coast, it's just truly amazing. And I just got to tell you, I got the experience of traveling internationally with him and seeing what he's doing on the trade files, global affairs, and of course, human aid. And it's great to see, and he's definitely getting a job done on the international scene that many of us don't see close hand. So we got to really appreciate what he's doing there. My job today is to introduce you to Mr. Dallaire. My wife Pam and I, when we got in politics, we met up with Mr. Dallaire. We worked on some files, international files with him, and we had the great honor to host him in Cape Breton last Remembrance Day. He came down to Cape Breton at Centre 200 in Sydney. The place was filled right up, families, children, parents, veterans, soldiers. And I'm so glad he's going to be here today to speak to you like he spoke to us in Cape Breton last year. Him and I have Dutch heritage to us, so we share that bond. He's looking at buying a place here in Nova Scotia, so he's getting closer and closer to us, and we really like that. So may I introduce to you Mr. Dallaire, a celebrated advocate for human rights, award-winning author, decorated veteran. He's also a respected government and UN advisor and a former senator. General Dallaire has often felt obligated to bring national and international attention to an important, but all too often ignored issues. Be it the atrocities of the Rwanda genocide, where hundreds of thousands of people were murdered, the recruitment and use of child soldiers, or the trials of post-traumatic stress disorder, which he himself and many other veterans have faced and are currently facing. His tireless advocacy, multiple accolades, awards, and distinctions only begin to scratch the surface of his contributions to Canadian and global humanitarian discourse and policy. So it is a great pleasure that I welcome, and I want you all to welcome to our stage, General Roméo Dallaire.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. And you've been very patient, and I appreciate it very much. I also arrived here in Pier 21 at 6 months of age in 1946 on a Red Cross ship, and then we were moved onto a Red Cross train, and then my father was posted in Quebec City. He was also a soldier. Récemment, mon fils qui est revenu de Haïti, mes 3 enfants servent dans les forces armées. Et le plus vieux revenait d'Haïti, puis à Québec, où la famille demeure. Et les avions arrivaient, puis les soldats étaient là. Puis un journaliste, il est venu me voir, puis il a dit, « Général, il dit, votre fils est dans l'armée. » Et avant que je puisse répondre, mon fils a dit, il dit, « Monsieur, il dit, je suis 4e génération dans l'armée du côté de ma mère, 3e génération dans l'armée du côté de mon père, puis on est une famille qui manque d'imagination. » So after disowning my son with that comment, I am going to speak to you mostly in not my mother tongue, although I will speak in Quebecois, but also mostly in English. I learned English in East End, Montreal, and where we lived in wartime housing for veterans that were built in the midst of all those oil refineries and so on. We never had to pick up leaves, in the fall because they never made it to the fall. They would burn out. And so my mom sent me to a cub pack to learn English. And on Tuesday nights, I'd go to this cub pack, and the young Sixer wanted to teach me something so I could say something to the Akela, to the leaders, so he could win the pennant. And so he taught me this little rhyme. It's not offensive, but it goes something like this. When you're out with your honey and your nose is a runny, don't think it's funny because it's not. Now, I notice a lot of you pick it up very fast, and some are still working on it. It took me a year and a half to figure that damn thing out. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to address you today on a subject that is of enormous significance to the security in the world and in this country. And that is the absolute horrific and massive use of children as weapons of war. And this issue has got to be taken on head-on, as it has continued for now well over 3 decades. And we in Canada are now situated in a position to actually be able to change that. We're actually in a position to be able to reduce those numbers because we're engaged in a process to prevent them from being recruited and to ultimately eradicate their use, because we've invented new peacekeeping tools in this country for our forces and for other countries, which we are teaching them, and we will end the use of children as a weapon of war. And this government has set the tone and given us the tools to be able to do it. This Prime Minister, as Minister of Youth, is pushing for the youth and protection of youth. Our Minister of Defense has moved the forces down a new doctrinal framework, and our Chief of Defense Staff has implemented the training of our forces and the preparation of other forces beyond our borders in stopping, in an innovative new ways, stopping the recruitment of children as weapons of war. And to that, we thank the Minister and we thank the Chief of Defense Staff. And our soldiers will be better prepared to face those threats. I'm talking to you today as a retired general, as a retired force commander of a UN force that saw the massive use of children to destroy hundreds of thousands of human beings, how they were indoctrinated and abused and used to do that on all sides. I talk to you also as a senator who, while in the Senate, attempted to change the policies and didn't quite successfully with the previous government. However, I've been having more success out of the Senate with the new government, the current one. And so that I'm quite happy about. And I've left the Senate because I needed to spend more time on this threat to our security and abuse of our humanity and the use of children in the most inhuman way, making them weapons of war. I had to spend the time, and that's why I've come here to Halifax. That's why I'm in Dalhousie, where they've created an institute where we're doing this work, and that's why I recently even bought a home in St. Margaret's Bay. I'm a grandfather. I'm a father of 3 children who serve. I'm a grandfather of young children who see the future positively and optimistically. But I've also seen children destroyed in the most horrific fashions. Destroyed as victims, but also destroyed as children. Their childhood ripped away from them as they became weapons of war and abused and were destroyed themselves, physically, emotionally, and ultimately used as a principal tool in the hands of adults to fight their wars. I've had weapons stuck up a nostril with a child of 13 years old about with his finger on the trigger and his eyes that big bulging out and the other kids yelling around him. will he pull the trigger? What will make him not pull the trigger? How did he end up there? And the only reason today I'm standing before you is because on that one checkpoint, of which I went through dozens upon dozens of checkpoints with all these kids on them. The only reason I got through that one that day is because he saw the chocolate bar in my hand. He was still a child, yet he had a weapon and he was ready to blow my head off. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the threat that we face. That is the moral and ethical dilemma that we face in conflicts today. And to face that and to be able to overcome that dilemma so it doesn't create the traumas that we have faced in the past, that we recognize that we could ultimately prevent that child from being recruited, let alone see him being used. We can do that, and we will move that way if we recognize that this is a priority effort in bringing new capabilities to the UN, to peacekeeping, by a leading nation in the world that is led by a very sensitive to children government and leader, and that is Canada, that is the Liberal Party, and that's Prime Minister Trudeau, and that's our forces. Sans formation efficace, sans capacité de reconnaître comment réagir aux enfants, nos soldats vont soit surréagir, ils vont sous-réagir, traumatisés, ou ils feront absolument rien. Et dans ces cas, les trois cas, il y a des enfants qui vont mourir, les enfants ils vont être abusés, et on risque aussi, nous, d'avoir des pertes dans cette situation. Donc, il faut prendre des actions concrètes pour enseigner des nouvelles méthodologies afin que nos forces puissent contrer cette menace et progressivement rendre les enfants-soldats moins utiles. Et moins qu'ils sont utiles, moins qu'ils vont être recrutés, moins qu'on va faire face à cette menace, et donc moins beaucoup des belligérants vont pouvoir agir pour augmenter leurs forces et continuer les conflits. Because we face generational wars when we use children as weapons of wars. They sustain wars. They don't win wars, they sustain wars. And in that generational framework, we cannot think of peace. We cannot think humanity will be safe, either overseas or potentially the recruitment of our own here to serve overseas, if we do not find a way to make these children less effective. Stop them from getting into, stop them from being forcibly recruited, forcibly abused, and brought into the forces that are the belligerents, or in some cases, some countries, to sustain those wars. We have got to go and intervene and bring the change there with the new skills and capabilities that have been created right here at the Roméo Dallaire Child Soldier Initiative at Dalhousie. The basis of all that change is here. But we wouldn't be able to pull it off if we didn't have the support of our government, of the Minister of National Defense, Sajid Jahan, his involvement, by the Chief of Defense Staff, by the soldiers recognizing they needed new capabilities to prevent and reduce that threat and ultimately bring peace. It's one thing to help and pick up the pieces afterwards, to do rehabilitation, reintegration. But how many of those kids never make it that far? How many die in the bush, abandoned and sick and injured? And so, why try to pick up the pieces at the end all the time? Why not get into the front end of it? Why not prevent them from being recruited by bringing in new programs to assist them in prevention and assist them in being able to realize that the risks of being recruited? And why not give our militaries and our police forces new skills, new knowledge, new doctrine, new tactics, new strategies in order to be able to make those child soldiers less effective, less useful, less attractive to people who want to recruit them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we've come up with three approaches to that. We, this country, we're pushing the envelope in changing peacekeeping here in this country. One approach is by championing child rights up front. Not a secondary thought, up front. The second is understanding that war has changed, peacekeeping has changed, and so tactics have got to change, training has got to change, and our perspective of success has got to change, not in looking at large numbers of forces being demobilized, but by eliminating the recruitment and the sustainment of those forces by getting the children out of the fight. Stop using kids. And the third way is by leading efforts to bring those changes to peacekeeping around the world. And that we have moved the yardsticks. Let me quote the Prime Minister. A future where children are no longer used as weapons of war is within our grasp, but only if we choose to make children a priority to achieve peace and security. These words were stated by him, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in a statement on the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers this last February, and has instilled, with the help of his colleagues in cabinet, an attitude that we want to stop this dimension of conflict. In our highly globalized world, where threats of children reside all around, every single conflict is using significantly children. There are 51 groups, non-state actors using them, and there are 7 countries still using them. We're talking in the tens and tens of thousands of children, and we're talking of large numbers of them being girls. Because girls provide other opportunities. They're not only up front, but they're also used to run the bivouacs and the camps and all the logistics. And they're also used as sex slaves and bushwives. Girls suffer traumas unheard of. Girls have children in the bush. And then they recruit the children. The wars last so long because they sustain them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the future of humanity is the future of our children. And we cannot change or affect that future. We cannot shape that future if we do not put those who are going to be that future up front and making their rights up front as the primary approach to looking at the prevention of conflict and ultimately the resolving of conflicts in the world. And so putting those children up front, the welfare of children, is not relegated anymore to the margins, to a sideshow because of more important things, but in fact become the core of the discussions of the resolution of conflicts. They become the element that can be a rallying point where people of opposing positions can sit around and discuss. We can get them around the table, even if they hate their guts and are ready to kill each other. We're prepared, and we can, and we've seen it, and we've done it. The Dallaire Initiative has done it already in the field, where we get both parties together, and we say, all right, we stop recruiting everybody under 13. Under 13, because they're recruiting them as young as 9. And they build them up over years to make them move to the front lines. So you stop recruiting under 13. We can influence significantly the negotiations and the advancement of peace accords by using the children as that catalyst to stop the fighting, ultimately drain the sources of the weapons that they use, and the primary weapon that they use is in fact the child soldier. This approach is very much in line with our Canada's feminist foreign policy, because protection of children, the stopping of conflict, the engagement of our forces and ultimately the engagement of our nation as being recognized as that great nation of peace. It's all in there. It's all part of it, based on the fundamental premise that you don't use children to fight wars, and we can stop it, and we know how. So how do we know? That second premise, that war has changed, and obviously our tactics and training must change. Well, yeah. So we have created and brought in a whole new way of thinking. We have introduced, through the Chief of Defense Staff and under the reinforced support of the Minister Sergeant, we have brought in a new doctrinal framework. What's a doctrinal framework? Sounds very military. That's what we're talking about. A doctrinal framework is an instrument by which militaries create the tactics, create the proper training, create the organizations, create the weapons that they need to achieve their missions. And so if you have a new way of thinking, if you look at the children a different way, if you bring them new tactical tools to your militaries and your police forces so that they don't have to use the weapon to make the child ineffective, if you can bring that to the fight, to the peace process, if you can do that, you can achieve ultimately your aim. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Canada is leading in training its forces, and it's training its forces now, and we're about to launch in training forces around the world. The Dallaire Initiative has, in fact, launched that with the Canadian forces. And so the ethos and the way of thinking of conflict is changing. The third element in that is, what tools have we brought in? What has, in fact, brought the new approach? And that we can thank the government. We can thank the minister, we can thank the Chief of Defense, we can thank the international community for buying in to two new policies and frameworks of policies to change how militaries act in peacekeeping. One is the LC process of bringing more women into the front lines, bringing more women into. Women are a force multiplier. They bring a whole different perspective to how you can resolve a conflict. They bring a new dimension that the children recognize. They react differently when they see women, even if they're in uniform. They communicate. Women can communicate where men can't even approach. And so all that together makes the LC, the recruitment of more women in peacekeeping, critical to resolving the use of children and reducing their effectiveness, because they will react, and we have proven it differently when they see women in uniform. That's one side. And the other policy is called, in fact, the Vancouver Principles. And it was at that international conference, at a UN conference where over 80 countries were invited, troop contributing nations, to come and say what they can provide to the UN. And what Canada provided, what the minister led, with the information that we provided out of the initiative here in Dalhousie, we created the Vancouver Principles, which were instruments by which the forces will be able to guide all that training, all that focusing into the future, and give them the way of thinking of peacekeeping totally different. We're into a new Pearsonian exercise here. Pearson brought in peacekeeping. We are modernizing it, and we're going to make it effective. And so it's not by sending thousands of troops and battalions left, right, and center. Many of the countries are not looking for that. They're looking for better skills. They're looking for better knowledge. They're looking for better tactics. They're looking to be professionalized. They're looking at nations like ours who are bringing these new ideas, these new tactics, and these new skills, and us to inculcate it in them, to give them the tools, and their polices, who both deploy together in these missions. and to build up their capacity to meet their needs. Africans are not looking for hundreds of thousands of Europeans or northern countries. They're looking for skills. They're looking for the ability to handle the problem. And that's what we have created. And that's what the Canadian Forces are being trained on. And that's what they're going to project. And that is what the Dallaire Initiative is doing right now in 9 countries. That Vancouver principle that was created, within 2 months, had 63 countries sign up to it. An unheard precedent in the UN history of getting people to buy in. Unheard of. We had another significant time. If you remember in 1997, we had the Landmines Treaty out of Ottawa. Well, we got rid of a horrific weapon system. Anti-personnel mines, destroying people. I was in Rwanda looking in a field and saw a woman with a child on her back blown up. She was in a tea plantation field. And the landmines of the previous war had trickled down because of erosion in the rains into the field. You can't see them. And that woman stepped on it. And she died, and so did the child died. Those horrific weapons, we got rid of them. And we led the world in getting rid of them. Well, let me make it very, very direct and simple. We have found the answer. We've tested it, we've researched it, we've used it, and it's ready to be deployed globally. The government has supported it, and we brought in, through the Vancouver Principles and LC, those tools and instruments by which we can inculcate it in others. We have a prime minister who wants to lead the world in protection of children. He can be the head of state of the world to actually progressively eradicate the use of children as a weapon of war. He can do that because he's supported by a party that wants that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, trying to be as calm as I can. I've taken my 9 pills today for my PTSD, so I'm not too bad. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the cusp of a changing nature of peacekeeping. We are back, but we're back with capabilities to change peacekeeping forever. And the way we're going to do it is how we will prove to other forces, police and military, to other countries, how to effectively make child soldiers ineffective and how to help prevent them being recruited. And in so doing, eliminate from the order of weapons of the war of humanity the most perverse weapon invented, and that is the use of children to destroy, to kill, to maim, to rape, to abuse, and be abused and destroyed because they've been recruited forcibly and against their will as weapons of war. Help us stop it. Get that into the policy framework. Get this government to continue that and make sure this government stays in power to implement it. Thank you very much.